So, good afternoon, friends, and I'm sure this is not a new topic to you. Today, we are having two sessions in the lecture series. I'll be talking on ICSI, when, why, and how. ICSI means intracytoplasmic sperm injection. When, why, how. The lecture will be very short, but I will be showing you all the videos related to ICSI. So, it will be very nice treat to your eyes. Followed by Dr. Kishore Narkani, who is my husband and an andrologist and a sexologist. He will be talking on OATs, that is oligosteroteratozoospermia. So less count, less motility, and less morphology in the male infertility. Okay, so let us start with ICSI, when, why, and how. So what is ART? ART is when an egg and sperm are taken out of body. So friends, what is ART? It's a when an egg and sperm are fertilized out of the body and then replaced inside the uterus to achieve pregnancy. It is called assisted reproductive technology. Now, what are the different parts of it? IVF-ET. In IVF, what we take out the egg, and with the egg, we put 50,000 sperms in the petri dish. So the sperms fertilize the egg and then we put it back. That is IVF. While in ICSI, we take out the egg, we clean it up and identify M1, M2, GV, etc. And then we inject one sperm into one egg, that is intracytoplasmic sperm injection. TISA means testicular sperm aspiration. In case of obstructive azoospermia or non-obstructive azoospermia, in 20% of the cases, you can put in a needle inside the testes and aspirate, that is known as testicular sperm aspiration. While MISA is microepididymal sperm aspiration, that means epididymis. In case of obstructive azoospermia, epididymis is pretty turgid. So you can take an incision through the microscope, you can remove the sperms, that is MISA. TISA means in the epididymis, you just put in a needle, which is a turgid in the obstructive azoospermia, put in a needle and aspirate. It is known as percutaneous aspiration of sperms from the epididymis. And microTISA, I'll be showing a very beautiful video of microTISA. It is a very, very different thing. It's a very difficult thing. In case of non-obstructive azoospermia, where it can be a torquid testes or very small testes, torsion testes, etc., where the we just cannot get the sperms and patient has to go for donor sperms. But if the patient insists that he wants his own, then microTISA can be done, and 20 to 30% of the cases you can get more his own sperms to inject. So that I'll show you the video of that. Egg donation is means in case of menopausal woman or in premature ovarian failure or in case of recurrent implantation failure of her own eggs. Sometimes you have to take egg from the other lady, that is known as egg donation. Embryo donation, sometimes there are defect in male and defect in female. For example, there may be Robertson translocation in male, and female may be having some inversion or translocation or something like that, and both of them may not be having a proper pregnancy. Every time missed abortion, they must be happening. Some problem in male, and sometimes male having cystic fibrosis, where he doesn't want that disease to go to his next progeny. Such cases we sometimes opt for embryo donation. Even recurrent implantation failure, 4 times, 5 times we have done ICSI and patient has failed, and patient says mere paas paisa hi nahi hai. Then there is a last resort, giving embryo of some frozen embryo. You can give it to this patient. Frozen embryo transfer is coming in the big way. Now all our embryo transfers are not fresh. 70% of our cycles are frozen because advanced technology of cryopreservation, thawing technology, and the pregnancy rates, better understanding of physiology of endometrium, physiology of the embryo, better pregnancy rates in frozen embryos. So nowadays, we also at our center, 70% we have shifted to frozen embryo transfer. And last but not least is a surrogacy. Surrogacy means when a genetic parent cannot have their own baby. Now mother and father both are there. Father may be having, everything is fine. Mother may be having no uterus, or uterus has been removed, or uterus is so bad that the whole uterus is stuck to each other in case of Asherman syndrome, or uterus has removed for some cancer or something, or uterus is absent from the birth, MR syndrome. Such patients are the one where uterus is not, she is not lady, the lady cannot take the pregnancy because of something wrong with the uterus, or sometimes she is physically not fit. She's too moribund obesity, like for 140 kg she is, or maybe hypertension, maybe diabetes, maybe renal disease, heart disease, where she is not allowed to become pregnant. In such cases, on medical grounds, you can take surrogacy. So these are the different procedures which come in ART. Now, what are the investigations we do? First is a blood investigation. Basic all investigations we do, but hormonal investigations to be done on day 2, FSH, LH, TSH, prolactin, and estradiol we are done in case of females, and AMH is one we should never forget. AMH is a very much important because AMH tells you what is the egg giving capacity of the woman. If AMH normally is 1.5 nanograms to 4 nanograms, if it is within this, that means patient will give you 8 to 16 oocytes from either side. But sometimes AMH is very high in case of polycystic ovary, where the ovary, the antral follicles are 20 on either side, and AMH may be 6, 8, 10. Such patients are hyper responders. So you should be very, very careful while giving them the hormonal injections and protocols. So AMH is one which is always done. All other, in case of males also, we do basic blood group, VDRL, HIV, hepatitis B, sugar, we do for him. But when the male comes to you, you should do his FSH, his testosterone in prolactin, because suddenly he gives a sperm, it's azoospermia. In that case, you might have to do even estradiol of this patient. So these investigations in the case of males are also important. Diabetic rule out is also, ruling out is also important. Second we do is a ultrasound. Ultrasound always tell you what is the reason of infertility. Patient may be having a septum and it is not seen. So septum may be there, polyp may be there, fibroid may be there, fibroids may be in the intramural, fibroids may be there. In case of ovary, ovary may be having a dermoid cyst or endometriosis or large PCO or low ovarian reserve, very small shrunken ovaries. So all these things you can see in ultrasound. HSG, SSG, of course for the tubal pregnancy. Histolaparoscopy is a gold standard for all the patients, and semen analysis, basic semen analysis is a must. Now, what are the causes of infertility? Male factor, my husband is going to talk on that. Unexplained infertility, everything is fine, but she is not becoming pregnant. So that is unexplained infertility. Oligospermia, very important cause. The males in 21st century are seen to have lesser and lesser counts and motility. So oligospermia, 50 to 60% of males are infertile. Severe oligospermia is, that means the sperm counts are less than 2 million per ml. Azoospermia, 0.1 or 0.2% of all our patients are having azoospermia, means no sperm at all. Erectile dysfunction and ejaculatory dysfunction, these are the causes in case of males. What of females? Uterine causes. As I said, uterine cause may be any Mullerian agenesis or Mullerian anomaly, unicornuate uterus, bicornuate uterus, subseptate uterus, small septum, all these uterine causes. There may be polyps inside, there may be fibroid submucous myomas, that is congenital anomalies, I said. Intrauterine pathologies like fibroids, polyps, Asherman's, very important cause, Asherman's. So endometrium is very, very bad. There may be infections like chlamydial infections or tuberculous endometritis. Intramural pathologies like adenomyoma and fibroids, tubal blocks. You can see on ultrasound 1/3 of the tubal blocks. If the hydrosalpinx is big, you can detect on the ultrasound. Otherwise, you have to do laparoscopy to find out. Especially tuberculosis, laparoscopy is the diagnostic procedure. Ovarian causes, chronic anovulation and polycystic ovary. That brings us to ovarian causes. Polycystic ovary, there may be cyst, follicular cyst or corpus luteal cyst, endometriosis, dermoid cyst, teomasis, poor ovarian reserve, and anovulation, especially in WHO grade 1, grade 2, group 1, group 2, and group 3. So what are the different treatment we have? First, treat the cause. If there is a cause, remove it. If there's a polyp, remove it. If there's a fibroid, remove it. Septum, you remove it. So whatever is a cause, you treat it. That is the first and foremost. Second is ovulation induction. In case of unexplained infertility or mild male factor infertility or endometriosis grade 1, grade 2, such are the cases we do ovulation induction. It can be done with the anti-estrogens like clomiphene citrate or letrozole. In PCO patients, first line of action is letrozole. If that is not happy, then you go ahead and do IUI. If with IUI is process the sperms and put it inside the uterine cavity at the time of ovulation. With IUI, if she doesn't become pregnant, then superovulation IUI is the next step, where you give anti-estrogens along with you can give gonadotropins or only gonadotropins. In case of polycystic ovary, go chronic step-up protocol. Start with only 50 international unit and then slowly 37.5 you increase 7 days, then 7 days little more like that. Because your aim in this case is monofollicular or bifollicular development, because you want to avoid multiple pregnancy. Operative laparohistoscopy is next, and last becomes ART. Now we come to ICSI. What is ICSI? Intracytoplasmic sperm injection. A single sperm is injected in olemma of a single oocyte. Now, what are the indications for ICSI? Failed fertilization in IVF. You do IVF and she gives you 10 oocytes. And then you process the sperm. Sperms are 50 million sperm count and 70% motility. You process the sperm count, very good sperm count motility. You put one egg along with that 50,000 sperms and put it in the incubator. Next day you see not a single fertilized, 10 oocytes and not a single fertilized. And what to do? This is known as a failed fertilization in IVF. There may be thick zona or some reason. So such patient next time you should do ICSI. Then severe male factor infertility. Any male with a count less than 2 million, then it is difficult in IVF to make them pregnant. So it is ICSI. Azoospermia. In case of azoospermia, no sperm count, it may be obstructive or non-obstructive. Usually in case of obstructive azoospermia, you can go inside the epididymis and remove, or you can go inside the testes and remove. So these are known as a sperm retrieval technique with PISA, TISA, TESE, microtesse and MISA. I just explained you how it is done. Retrograde ejaculation. Retrograde ejaculation means a patient has a sex with his wife. He gets a satisfaction, but wife says it's totally dry. There are the few conditions where the sperms go back. Usually in the obesity, in case of diabetic males, in case of some operation on the spinal, some operation, or sometimes it is in the prostatectomy. Elderly patients, males, do have enlarged prostate, or maybe a stone removed to the prostatectomy, to the cystoscopy and removed. So the internal sphincter is damaged there. The urinary outlet is damaged. In such patient, the sperms go back in the retrograde ejaculation. So collection of retrograde ejaculation is very difficult. What you do, you give, what we give? Soda bicarb. Soda bicarb to the patient for 2 days, and then the 2 days you give soda bicarb to the male. And on third day, let him pass urine and come back. And then he has a sex with his wife. And then he comes back and gives the sperms to you, and then you process it. So this is how you do the collection of retrograde ejaculation. Erectile dysfunction, ejaculatory dysfunction, and sexual dysfunction, these are also indications for ICSI. Now, what are the steps of ICSI? First of all, you selection of the patient for ICSI. Once you decided this patient requires ICSI, now you divide the lady in 3 groups. First, she may be a poor responder, she must be a normal responder, or she must be a hyper responder. In case of, so you have to select the protocol accordingly. If the patient is having normal responder, you can give her agonist protocol, or you can give her antagonist protocol, anything, long agonist, long protocol, or antagonist protocol. If she is a young and very good responder, you can give a minimal ovarian stimulation. So anti-estrogens along with gonadotropins, along with antagonists, and you can give her rupture. So she gets 7 to 8 oocytes, because male is at difficulty. She is not having any problem. 7 to 8 oocytes are enough for her. So you can give her. So it becomes cheaper also, minimal ovarian stimulation for younger patients. For hyper responders who are PCO patient, who have got history of ovarian hyperstimulation previously, in such patient you should give only antagonist protocol or MOS protocol. In case of poor responders, you got many protocols, different protocols. In case of poor responders, you can give ultra short protocol, you can give short protocol, you can long protocol and stop protocol, give FSH and LH together. Sometimes growth hormones are needed. Sometimes they should be prepared with DHEA or testosterone. All these different protocols. Or if you are doing embryo banking, you can give MOS protocol or modified natural protocols and collect the oocytes. So you have selected the protocol. When you give injections for 10 days, follicles will be developed. When the leading 3 follicles are 17 millimeter in size, that is the time you give trigger. Now, in case of antagonist protocol, you can give a trigger with HCG. It can be urinary HCG or recombinant HCG, or you can give it agonist trigger. In case of antagonist agonist protocol, you should only give a HCG trigger. After giving HCG trigger or agonist trigger, After 34 to 36 hours, you do egg retrieval. Ovum pickup, it is known as. Now, ovum pickup is done with a long needle through the vagina and you aspirate under anesthesia. And you aspirate and identify the OCC or COC, cumulus operous complex. That is an egg along with the cumulus. You cannot see egg just like that. Egg is with the cumulus. So you collect that and put it in the flushing media and put it in the incubator, 5% or 6% depending on media. Keep it in the incubator for 2 hours. And after that, you go and collect the sperms. The sperms are collected by masturbation or sperm retrieval technique, or sperms are frozen. You can use a frozen sperm. And then you have to process the sperm. ICSI has a different process. IVF has a different process. Once you do the processing, then you go to the egg and you remove the cumulus by using hyaluronidase. Hyaluronidase, when you remove, you can see a large oocyte, which may be GV or is a granule, GV or M1 or metaphase 2 oocytes. So germinal vesicle or metaphase 1 or metaphase 2 oocytes. M2 oocyte is the one which is to be injected. Then you have a micro manipulator. Micro manipulator has got an injection needle and the holding pipette. So with the holding pipette, you hold the egg, and with the injection pipette, you inject one single sperm. And before injecting, it is clean, it is PVP media, the sperm is put, so that its motility is reduced, and also the tail is injured, and it is picked up with the tail and it is injected inside the oocyte. And this is how the intracytoplasmic injection is done. So what are the complications of ART? Ovarian hyperstimulation and high order multiple pregnancy. These are the complications. Now, OHSS prevalence is 5 to 20%. Risk factors are young age, asthenic habitus, polycystic ovarian patient, HCG trigger if you are given, and HCG in the luteal phase support. Now, high order multiple pregnancy. Prevalence is 1.5 to 13%. How do you treat? Elective single embryo transfer. People are now going back to elective one blastocyst transfer because they want to avoid multiple pregnancy. See, if you give multiple pregnancy, there are chances of abortion, there are chances of preterm delivery, congenital anomaly, patient getting hypertension, diabetes, and losing the baby, eclampsia, and cost. Cost is very, very high. Cost of medicines, cost of 3 to 4 times admissions, cost of delivery, cost of baby if it is preterm, the cost of NICU. So that is why people prefer single baby only. So single elective transfer. Use of less aggressive stimulation protocol. So MOS protocol or modified natural protocols you can do. Excessive oocyte aspiration and vitrification. So whatever embryos you have, aspirate, form embryos and vitrify and keep, and every time, every month, keep only 2 to 2 2. So you'll get chance of getting twins is very less and single is very high. Multifetal reduction can be done. Cycle cancellation, coasting, aspiration of follicle before HCG administration, and switching to IVF in IUI cycle. Many a times multiple pregnancy happens in IUI cycles because IUI you cannot control the follicles. You got 4 follicles on this side, 2, 3 on this side, and you do IUI, very good sperm count, she becomes multiple pregnancy. So in that, sometimes we aspirate on one side, keep only 2 follicles to rupture on the other side. This is what is the treatment. Ectopic pregnancy prevention is in 1 to 3%. Risk factors is previous history of ectopic pregnancy, tubal surgery, and pelvic inflammatory disease, managed medically and surgically. And last slide is prevention of ovarian hyperstimulation. So before starting the treatment, before, during, and after, before identification of risk factors to individualize control, as I told you, identify the patient who is hyper responsive, and then give her only minimal ovarian stimulation or give only antagonist protocol. So this is important. Correct adoption of stimulation protocols. Monitor COS using ultrasound and E2 assay constitutes the gold standard. Use of GNH antagonist protocol and cycle cancellation or coasting. Now during the process, limit the dose of concentration of HCG. Now if you feel you get to agonist protocol and you feel she is going to go for IVF, you do OHSS, then you can do coasting. But you have to give a rupture, a very small dose, only 125 micrograms of rec HCG, or you can give 2000 HCG, aspirate all the oocytes and freeze them. and you can continue giving capgolin to the patient or antagonist to the patient. So this is how you can prevent. In vitro maturation, prophylactic albumin and starch in high risk, transfer of single embryo reduces multiple pregnancy rate, does OHSS. Then after it is happened, cryopreservation of all the embryos, and do not do any fresh transfer. Cryopreserve all the embryos. Using progesterone instead of HCG for luteal phase support. Dopamine agonist like catgolin, and use of antagonists post cryofreezing all embryos or with fresh ET. So this is my slides are open. Now I am going for all the live video. You'll really enjoy the video session now. It's a nice video. I love it. So this was one of the oldest videos. Now I'll be actually showing you how the ICSI is done. Now here, see, this is an egg retrieval procedure. This is the vaginal ultrasound machine, and that's a long needle. You put it inside, and this is how the follicular fluid comes. So in our hospital, my husband is the one who does, Dr. Kishore Nadkarni is the one who does egg retrieval. So you can see the ultrasound machine and the follicles there. These are the follicles. All of you can see it, follicles, and you can see follicles, the egg, the needle goes inside and you aspirate and you get the follicular fluid. Okay, so needle goes inside, aspirate. So this is all the follicular fluid. So what, this is a schematic representation. You, with the vaginal ultrasound machine, you go inside, you go very near to the oocyte, and then you go and aspirate the oocyte with the follicular fluid. So this is how it comes. Okay, one after the one, aspirate, then another. I showed you that. Okay. Okay, so this is known as a ovum pickup or egg pickup. Okay, you can see that patient is in lithotomy position. Now I've got the tubes and I put it in the petri dish and identify. This is oocyte identification. Okay, you identify oocyte and keep it in the incubator for 2 hours, and then you have to, for ICSI, you have to dissect it. Use high luminance and then identify GVM1E2. So this is kept in the oocytes are now taking rest in the, this is TISA procedure, the sperms. It has been removed, the sperms are removed and they are processed. Sperm processing has to be done even though they are removed from the testes or epididymis or they are given by masturbation. They have to be processed because you have to remove all ROS producing RBCs, WBCs, prostaglandins, etc. So sperms are processed in the lab. Okay, even though there are few, very few also, processing is a must, and it's a different way processing. A swim down technique usually because a very low sperm count, so we do swim down technique. Now this is egg is picked up and then the sperms are cleaned, PVP media, so motility is reduced with the sperms. Because sperms are so motile, use PVP media and you injure the tail before you pick up. So this is what a cleaning of oocyte going on. And this is the egg. This is a holding pipette. You can see down real one holding, and this is injection pipette. You go inside, aspirate the cytoplasm a little and inject the sperm inside. This is what is ICSI, intracytoplasmic sperm injection. This is day one. 2 PN stage, you can see two polar bodies and you can see two polar PN stage. As, so this is 2 PN, male and female, and this is a polar body 1 and polar body 2. So this is day 2 when the fertilization, day 1 when fertilization takes place. Then very good, very nice cleavage takes place, and that fertilized oocyte becomes now embryo, and embryo 2-cell embryo. It is happens in P2. So 2-cell and 4-cell you see on day 2. Day 1 is a fertilization, day 2 is 2-cell and 4-cell embryo. You can see it here, and you can see, yes, this is again day 3, 8-cell embryos, very beautiful. And this is morula. This is morula. Okay, day 4 embryos. You cannot count how many blastomeres. It's known as blastomeres. Okay, so this is nice morula, and slowly cavitation takes place. That is known as early blastocyst. This is, you can see blastocele cavity. This is blastocele cavity. This is inner cell mass. This is a tropoectoderm cells. Okay, this is early blastocyst, and this is expanded blastocyst and hatching. Okay, extended. This is how the cells take place. Now how to do embryo transfer. Now these embryos are ready. So this is a long tube embryo transfer tube. On the sonography machine, patient's bladder is full, half full, and you can see the endometrium, and you can put the 1 or 2 embryos. You can select, you can take 1 or 2 embryos, and you can go and you can inject it gently, very gently. Then this is how the embryo transfer takes place. Okay, so this is what is a total ICSI procedure. Now I'll show you a little bit of PGD. There are 3 to 4 videos now. This is PGD. Now pre-implantation genetic diagnosis is done by single gene hereditary disease or inherited disorder. So what you do on day 3 on 8 cell, you can do PGD on 8 cell, or you can do in tropoectoderm biopsy. This is 8 cell. You laser with the laser you just dissolve the zona pellucida, and then with the holding pipette you hold, with the injection pipette you go inside and aspirate 1 blastomere, and then study that blastomere. This is how it is done. And then you study that cell, and the results come as if there is any defect or not. That is one thing. And similarly, you can do tropoectoderm biopsy on this is a blastocyst. Now I showed you 8 cell, and this is a blastocyst. Again in blastocyst also, this is a very nice hatching procedure is shown. In blastocyst also you can do you can see the lower down very nicely. Zona pellucida is dissolved with the laser assisting, and you can do now this is a procedure. Now this is a tissue. Now this is a procedure. That is okay. This is modified microtissa, where incision is taken on albuginia. A nice tube. त्या ट्यूब सक्कल म्हणतात ती seminiferous. So you could see the seminiferous tubules removed through this very nicely. That is TISA. That was a TISA procedure, and this is a PISA. You can see the PISA procedure where epididymis needles. You go inside with the needle and take it out. This very nicely taking out with the needle. This is PISA, okay, and you can see the sperms, very beautiful sperms. This is done with the obstructive azoospermia, and this is a this is a, this is a flushing media which is used, and then we tease it, and then we can identify sperms. This is how it is done. This is cheaper way. When my husband is not there, I do this way, TISA. And this is a small
microdissection requires an operating room equipped with a top quality operating microscope next to the in vitro fertilization laboratory. The procedure requires microsurgical expertise and a basic set of microsurgical instruments. In our setting, microdissection is performed on an outpatient basis under intravenous anesthesia with propofol. In addition to this sedation, a 10 milliliter solution of 2% lidocaine is injected around the spermatic cord near the external inguinal ring. In this video, we present the operative aspects of microdissection in a patient with a history of cryptorchidism and orchidopexy performed at age 6. After anesthesia, a transverse 2 centimeter incision is made through the skin and subjacent layers, and the testis is exteriorized.
completely I did.
Obstructive azoospermia usually have very small testes. Proper identification of testicular vessels under the tunica albuginea is made prior to the incision. Then a single large mid-portion incision is made in an avascular area of the tunica albuginea under 6 to 8 times magnification, and the testicular parenchyma is widely exposed. The use of optical magnification and microsurgery technique allows the preservation of intratesticular blood supply, as well as the identification of tubules more likely to harbor sperm production. Dissection of the testicular parenchyma is carried out at 16 to 25 times magnification, searching for the seminiferous tubules with the largest diameters. The superficial and deep testicular regions may be examined, and intraoperative blood loss is negligible. The video shows a homogeneous pattern of collapsed seminiferous tubules. However, an area containing dilated tubules can be clearly distinguished. Microsurgical guided testicular biopsies are performed by removing these enlarged tubules. Testicular tissue specimens are placed in a petri dish containing sperm culture media and then sent to the laboratory for examination. Under stereo microscopy, the tubules are minced mechanically using needled tuberculin syringes. After this initial processing step, the specimen is examined using the inverted microscope in search for sperm. The surgeon should be informed promptly if any sperm is found to allow him to decide upon continuing or finishing the procedure. Testicular sperm retrieval or microdissection are used for in vitro fertilization with intracytoplasmic sperm injection. Mature spermatozoa with normal morphology are selected and injected into the oocyte cytoplasm.
So friends, thank you very much. I think there were beautiful videos, and maybe another 5 to 10 minutes I can answer your questions, because Kishore is also going to talk on. Yeah, madam, is it possible to preserve
Yes,
the few countable number of sperms? Yes, it is possible to microtissue. Very much possible to preserve. No problem. Then what is the complication with polyspermy in ICSI? See, in ICSI, polyspermy does not take place. ICSI, because you are putting one sperm into one egg, so polyspermy does not take place. Polyspermy can take place in case of IVF, where one egg and 50,000 sperms you're putting. What is a complication? I told you. Then at what stage embryo transfer done? See, there are 3 ways. You can do it on day 2, that is 2 cell, 4 cell. You can do it on day 3, that is 8 cell, or you can do blastocyst on day 5 or day 6. In our hospital, we do sequential transfer. We put on day 2, 2 cell or 4 cell, one embryo, and on blastocyst, on day 5, we do second. So the pregnancy rates are very highest. At what stage embryo transfer? At what AMH should a donor egg be offered to patient? See, AMH less than 0.5 still, and you see enteral follicle 2 and 3. In such cases, if the patient is willing to have embryo banking, we give it embryo banking, where 2 to 3 cycles we do, and then we collect the sperms and collect the embryos, freeze them, and put back. But some patients just cannot afford that. In that case, you try one on her. If she gives you 2 to 3 eggs and fertilize 1 or 2 embryos, you put back. If she doesn't and she cannot afford, you can give her. So I would say anywhere less than 0.5 mh you can offer egg donation if patient is willing. During PGD, does it affect the embryo quality as as me remove a part of the tissue? No, not at all, because see, every blastomere is capable of making one embryo. So you take one blastomere, usually not. I would say 0.99% no. What are the chances of multiple pregnancy with ICSI? See, with ICSI, there is no chance of one. How many you put, according to, there is a chance of multiple pregnancy. See, if you put only one blastocyst on day 5, no way, you'll get only single. But you put 2 blastocysts on day 5, then the chances of 20% chance of multiple pregnancy with 2 blastocysts. If you do 2 on day 3, again 5% chance of twins. What are the chances of it? Ma'am, is it possible to preserve embryos? If yes, how long? So you can preserve embryos for 100 years, but patient should afford and you should also afford. Preservation is done. You do cryopreservation in the small. Now there's a very beautiful vitrification techniques, and put it in the small droplets and put it in small tubes, so you can preserve them for many years. Of course, liquid nitrogen and everything maintenance is very important. We usually at our center we preserve for 6 months. We don't charge them. Within 6 months, if she does not take place, next 6 months we charge them 3,000 per month. So that is the thing. Ma'am, is it possible to? Yeah. A time for double IUI at what hours? See, double IUI usually is done when you're doing single anti-estrogen. You're giving letrozole or clomiphene citrate. You see one follicle, no need. Usually 80% of our 80 to 90% we do only single embryo. Double embryo only when do there are 2 follicles here and 2 follicles. I do put I do one, but there are 2 more, and patient is very keen on becoming pregnant and she does not mind twins, then I do a second one. So after 24 hours, double IUI. Ma'am, how many cycles of IUI will you offer before going for IVF? Only 3 cycles. Only 3 cycles, not more than 3. I don't have patience, and my patients also don't have patience. Ma'am, how many IUI cycles? How is estrogen used for down regulation? I have not used it for down regulation, but it is said that in poor responders, you can use from day 23, 24, use Proguanova 1 BD for 5 days. That can do a very good down regulation. In poor responders, you can give using it. Ma'am, does prolonged preservation of egg embryo affect quality? No. If your lab is good, it does not. Ma'am, does prolonged preservation? No. Answer. Okay. I think now the questions are over. I'll pass it on to Kishore. Jagan. There are 3 more patients. 3 more questions. Okay. The questions I'll answer after Kishore has finished his lecture. Sujata. So is it 24 hours and 36 hours or 24 hours? See, if you want to do double, then 24 and 48 hours, Sujata. How improve the quality of embryos in poor sperm quality? How to improve the quality of embryos in poor sperm quality? See, embryos depend on what is from the mother's side. If she is a younger patient, then her quality is always good. PCO quality is never so good. And in poor responders, you can improve it by giving DHEA, testosterone, antioxidants like Fertihof. From Sujata Gajendran, superb. Thank you. Thank you,
Hello,
Sujata.
Dr.
Love you.
Mato.
Love you. How do you use this? Usually DHA is given for the poor responders. If you see 1 or 2 follicles on this side and 1, 2 to 3 on the other side, patient is younger patient. They do very well. Younger patient with poor ovarian reserve do very well DHA. Minimum 60 days prior. Okay, minimum 60 days. Minimum 60 days. Does blood in inner catheter affects pregnancy rates after embryo transfer? They say yes, but inner catheter, yes. Because blood may reduce the pregnancy rate because that shows you hurt the endometrium somewhere. And if you hurt the endometrium, the pregnancy rates are little lesser. I missed this webinar. Are you doing endometrium scratching? Yes, I do. I do. Patients who have recurrent implantation failure 2 to 3 times, I do endo scratch. Yes, I do.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be in front of you this afternoon. And I deal with male infertility in all our centers. Sperm retrievals and other things also I do. But today we are going to talk on a topic that is male infertility with special emphasis on OATS, that is oligoasthenoteratozoospermia and DNA fragmentation. Now, evaluation of male factor. The reason why I have decided to talk on OATS is that most of the patients that come to you in your OPD will have some form of male seminal dysfunction. That means some parameters of sperm function will be changed, altered, and you will have to treat them. There will be a section of patients who have azoospermia. That's an entirely different category. There will be a section of patients who have very severe oligospermia, 1 to 2 motile sperms present. That is one section. But a vast majority, 70% of patients that come to your clinic will have low counts or low motility or poor morphology. And they come under the category of oligoasthenoteratozoospermia. And this is something that is really treatable. Now, evaluation, let's go through the initial things. The evaluation of male factor is centered around a patient's seminogram. A good standardized semen analysis report, at least 3 reports you should see is previous reports. The abstinence period should be at least 2 days, not more than 3 to 5 days. 3 days, now we normally take the period around between 2 and 3 days because stasis in the epididymis exposes them to reactive oxidant species. But the semen examination is the most basic investigation. Semen analysis has a sensitivity of 89.6%, and we still rely on it as a marker for male infertility. Serum FSH, serum testosterone, and DNA fragmentation also provide information regarding testicular function and sperm chromatin damage. Now, no single semen parameter is a powerful discriminator of fertility status. Semen analysis reference ranges are not the minimal values required for conception. We consider the 5th percentile values. They are not the minimum values. Even a person with one motile sperm in his ejaculate is capable of conceiving naturally, but the chances are very low. The testicular volume is very important. So whenever you see the semen report, you should also know what the testicular size is. If the patient has very small testes, obviously there must be some compromise with his counts and some amount of testicular failure, particularly if there are some congenital syndromes. Now, testicular volume is measured by an orchidometer, and it is directly proportional to the number of seminiferous tubules present, and it more reliably predicts fertility status and androgen levels. Now, I told you oligoasthenoteratozoospermia means that all the 3 parameters of sperm function, that is count, motility, and morphology, are affected. The commonest causes of OATS, clinical causes, are varicocele and genital tract infection. Please remember that these are the 2 treatable causes. So before you go on to other things, you should rule out whether this patient has genital tract infection, that is leukocytospermia, or he has a varicocele. You know the different causes of male infertility. I'm not going through this whole slide, but generally the causes are, you have congenital causes like Klinefelter syndrome, etc. Then you have pituitary causes like hypogonadotropic hypogonadism. You have prolactin, hyperprolactinemia as another endocrine cause. Then you have, as I told you, varicocele and leukocytospermia. These are the two common causes. Then you have immunological problems, that is anti-sperm antibodies. You have sexual problems like failure to consummate a marriage or inability to deposit the sperms into the vagina, that is erectile or ejaculatory dysfunction. Then you have other seminal fluid abnormalities like too viscous semen, too dilute semen, very low quantity semen, very low amount of semen coming. And of course, you have a large group called as reproductive tract obstruction. And those are the people who usually have azoospermia. But the important thing is that in the majority of the patients, there is no demonstrable cause. And this category comes under the heading of idiopathic male infertility. Now, there are certain comorbidities or risk factors for idiopathic male infertility. These are some of them: tight jeans, synthetic underwears, hot tub baths, working at hot temperatures, tobacco chewing, smoking, driving two-wheelers for a long time, antibiotic abuse, STDs and infections, X-rays, radiations, microwave radiations from cell phones and cellular cell towers on top of your building, stress of lifestyle, other environmental factors, and of course the role of estrogens. You have air pollution, water pollution, pesticides, chemicals, and plastics. Of course, as you know, plastics contain chemicals which are needed to either make the plastic soft or to make the plastic hard, and all these have effects on the sperms. Let's go to some of these causes. Phytoestrogens. Phytoestrogens are plant-derived non-steroidal compounds that can mimic human estradiol and bind to estrogen receptors. And particularly soy, legumes, soybean oils, seeds, milk products, cheese are known to adversely affect semen parameters because they're very abundant in estrogens. And you know that estrogen and testosterone has inverse proportions. Now, consumption of coffee. A large Danish study of more than 2,500 men showed that consumption of more than 800 milligrams per day of caffeine results in decreased sperm concentration as compared to non-caffeine drinkers. So there are people who are addicted to coffee. So you have to be little careful. You should not drink more than 800 milligrams. That is not more than 4 cups. Alcohol. People say that alcohol does not affect, but consuming more than 8 pegs per week affects spermatogenesis, or having 6 pegs at a time, binging. Acute binging is known to immediately affect within an hour or two. It can cause reduction in sperm motility as well as morphology. Then anabolic androgenic steroids. These are increasingly used by sports person for muscle building, and these anabolic steroids can suppress the testes and reduce spermatogenesis. Most anabolic steroid users are young people involved in bodybuilding who are unaware of the reproductive consequences of their actions. Cell phone users, Agarwal, Fejas had lots of literature available on this. They have shown that exposure to microwave radiation, 9 to 11 megahertz of microwave radiation, can affect mainly motility and morphology, thus indicating the potentially hazardous effects. Battery is on. Hazardous one. Just a minute. Showing the hazardous effects of microwave radiation. Sauna exposure, again, heat to the testes. If you go to the gym and instead of doing exercise, you sit in the sauna for hot steam and sauna for an hour or so. And if you do it every day, there are certain factors it could affect. Because of the excessive heat, it could affect the sperm counts. Similarly, other things that increase heating like tight-fitting underwears, electric blankets, excessive two-wheeler driving, sock diapers, etc. Now, if you see here, all these factors, smoking, drugs, pollution, diabetes, all these things, infections, varicoceles, all act through the mechanism of oxidative stress. That is, they increase the reactive oxidant species and exposure of the sperms to reactive oxidant species. Then if you see chemical exposures, in day-to-day life, these are all the things that we use: foundation creams, blush, nail polish, sunscreens, shampoos, conditioners, lipsticks, fragrance, lip balms, moisturizers, hand soaps, hair sprays, the mosquito sprays, bug sprays, body scrubs, cologne, shave gels, all of them, these are chemicals, and these are known to affect, these are all endocrine disruptors, and these are known to affect the sperms. So plastic products, pesticides, personal care products, medications, industry solvents, polluted water, etc., polluted seafood, can all act as endocrine disrupting agents. They increase the inhibin B and they affect the sperm thing. So let us go to OATS management. How do you manage oligoasthenoteratozoospermia? You have this patient, say his count is 5 million, his motility is 10%, his active motility is 5%, and his morphology shows only 3% normal sperms. So those, how will you manage such a case of OATS? First of all, rule out the two reversible causes, leukocytospermia and varicocele. Both these impede sperm motility and cause DNA fragmentation through the mechanism of ROS. Both these conditions have to be aggressively treated in borderline sperm counts. Now, let us go to leukocytospermia. What is leukocytospermia? It is presence of pus cells 1 into 10 raised to 6. Now, in the WHO nomenclature, you have to write round cells because you need to differentiate pus cells from round cells. Round cells may be spermatogonia or immature spermatocytes. So every smear must be stained with hematoxylin eosin to differentiate neutrophils from spermatogonia. Now the WHO cutoff is 1 leukocyte in 10 squares of the macular chamber, that is 1 into 10 raised to 6. Now certain from Cleveland, Ashok Agarwal, etc., they have suggested that even 1 leukocyte in 100 squares of the macular chamber, that is the cutoff of 0.1, is sufficient to call it leukocytospermia. It is usually due to infection in the prostate and seminal vesicles, that is accessory gland infections. Sperm culture should be done because you have patients asking you that, why are you giving me antibiotics? What is the proof? So you should do sperm cultures, and in 50% of the cases we get sperm cultures positive. The leukocytospermia causes production of ROS and free radicals, and this causes DNA fragmentation and reduces sperm motility. The common organisms are E. coli, urea plasma, Klebsiella, Pseudomonas, etc. And the antibiotics used are doxycycline, quinolones, micacin, and azithromycin. Now, which one will you use? I prefer doxycycline, first line, 100 milligrams, 1 tablet daily for 15 to 21. Now, two important things here in any antibiotic used is that the dose should be proportional to the body weight. Now, whatever dose 100 milligram OD is meant for a 60 kg person. Now, many of our patients are 120 kg. Some of them are even 150 kg. So, accordingly, you should increase the dose. And the second thing is that the duration. Now, for an ordinary cough, cold, or something else, you toothache, you would probably take for 3 to 5 days. But in case of accessory gland infection, you need to take antibiotics for 15 to 21 days because that is the time it requires to develop concentrations and MIC values in the prostatic fluid. This is an important cause of OATS, leukocytospermia, and the results of treatment are extremely satisfactory. Some of the reports here that you can use ciprofloxacillin, levofloxacillin, azithromycin, doxycycline, and clarithromycin. Personal preference, doxycycline first choice. You can use azithromycin. It's a very good drug because it acts against chlamydia and some of the larger organelles. Azithromycin, same thing, 500 OD, 500 BD, or even TDS for 15 to 21 days. Among the quinolones, my personal preference is for plurifloxacillin because I have read about 5 reports which say that plurifloxacillin gives the maximum concentrations in the prostatic fluid. So you have prulin, persin, rulizo, tablets, 600 milligram, 1 tablet a day for, depending on body weight again, BD or TDS, but 1 tablet for 21 days. And in very resistant infections, you can give micacin injections, 500 milligrams BD, or even inject intraurethrally diluted micacin in 10 ml of distilled water, which I have tried in very resistant infections, and it really gives wonderful results. Now we go to varicoceles. Varicocele is a common surgical occurrence that is seen in an infertile patient, and varicocele causes subfertility by producing oligoasthenoteratozoospermia because it exposes the sperms to reactive oxidant species. It also acts through the mechanism of ROS, and surgical treatment of varicocele improves the total motile count and should be surgically operable. Confirmed varicoceles with OATS should be operated, and they improve the IUI results also. So this is how a varicocele looks like, and it's always confirmed by a color Doppler. When you do a Valsalva, that is forced expiration against a closed glottis, you can get the reversal of blood flow. And there are different operations, but microsurgical varicocelectomy comes nearest to being the ideal operation. Now, this is not that simple an operation. You need a microscope, preferably, or at least an operating loop. You take an incision on the external, near the external ring, a transverse incision. You loop the cord and bring it out. You open the cord by incising the layers, and you go down to the cord structures, and you will find the large 1 or 2 veins. You will find 2 sets of veins. One is outside, which you can easily ligate, and one set of veins which is very close to the vas deferens, and very close to the artery. So that is the thing that is very important to ligate, and you should not damage the artery in a microsurgical. That is why microsurgical, so that the artery is not damaged. If you damage the artery in a microsurgical varicocelectomy, the testes will undergo an atrophy, and you will have screwed up that patient's chances of becoming pregnant. So microsurgical varicocelectomy, when needed, if there's a marked grade 3 varicocele where the vein size is more than 3.5 millimeters, you should operate these varicoceles, and the results are excellent. And if you see a meta-analysis, it also shows that varicoceles with the vein size more than 3 millimeters do benefit from varicocele surgery. And both the American Urology Association and the ASRM recommend varicocele repair for all patients with palpable varicoceles with abnormal semen parameters. Even in azoospermia, they say that even in azoospermia, the literature tells us that if you operate a varicocele, a gross varicocele with 0 sperm counts, then there is a good chance that the sperm counts will come back. Literature tells us, but again, you have to weigh it here. You have to see the testicular volume. You have to see the extent of testicular failure. You should see the FSH levels. For example, if the testis is less than 10 ml in diameter and the FSH is 70, 80, then this patient is unlikely to benefit from a varicocele repair. But if the testicular volume is normal, the FSH is mild, borderline high, around 20, 25, and there is a large varicocele, this patient can be given a chance. But what they say now is that you need a testicular biopsy. If a microbiopsy of the testis shows either a early maturation arrest or a Sertoli cell only syndrome, these patients are unlikely to benefit from a varicocelectomy. But if this patient shows a late maturation arrest or a hypospermatogenesis, then these are the candidates who are likely to benefit from a varicocele surgery. So a fine microbiopsy of the testes will give us the pathology of this azoospermia, the extent of testicular failure, and what is the cause of non-obstructive azoospermia. And you can then select the patients for a varicocelectomy. Again, reports which indicate that varicocelectomy does help. Now we'll come to DNA fragmentation. You need to know something about DNA fragmentation and reactive oxidant species. Now, you must have heard a lot of people talking about DNA fragmentation tests. Why do we need to do DNA fragmentation tests? Count of 100 million, motility 50%, morphology almost normal, less than 4% abnormal. Why do you need to do DNA fragment? Yet this patient is not conceiving, or if the patient conceives, the patient has got recurrent implantation failure or recurrent pregnancy loss. These are the cases where you would want to do a DNA fragmentation test. If the patient is not conceiving and has a varicocele, again, you would probably need to do a DNA fragmentation test. And the reason is that we always resort to ICSI. Male infertility is the cause of patients in nearly 50% of the cases, and yet 4 to 8% new couples seek ART treatment every year. And in spite of 30 years of ART practice, the birth rates, the successful IVF successful rates globally, that is, if you take an average of the world global live birth rates, they are around 35 to 40%. Is this good enough? Can this not improve? So after development of ICSI, there is no incentive to develop any new therapies for male infertility. If the counts are very low, do ICSI. But ICSI is not the end of it. ICSI bypasses the problem. It doesn't solve the problem. You must investigate the patient genetically. You must find out what are the chances of transmitting the cause of infertility to your progeny. And you must know the DNA of your sperms. So that means what? That if the patient has borderline sperm counts and you are going to an ICSI, if the patient has low sperm counts and you're going for an ICSI, you are subjecting nearly 30% of women, even though they are normal, they are absolutely normal women, their oocytes are absolutely normal, yet you are subjecting them to an invasive procedure when that procedure could have been avoided. So this is the reason why more testing of the male is needed. So SDF tests evaluate genetic content and help to detect molecular abnormalities, and they can supplement conventional semen analysis and improve the clinical value. Now a little bit about the spermatozoon. What is the importance of the DNA? The paternal contribution to fertilization is frequently overlooked because the spermatozoa is often considered to be a silent vector whose only function is to deliver the paternal genome to the maternal oocyte. However, this perception is far from the truth. Now the sperm has a much bigger contribution. During fertilization, the sperm transmits the nuclear DNA. It also transmits the oocyte activation factor. A population of 3,000 different messenger RNAs, which are required for synthesis of development-related proteins, are also transmitted. And human centrioles are also paternally derived, thus supporting the fact that defective spermatozoa can cause aberrant embryonic cell division And sperm epigenome also plays a critical role in embryo development. So the sperm DNA has a large role to play. Now, what is this sperm chromatin? You know the double coiled DNA matrix, the Watson-Crick model. The sperm chromatin is broadly divided into a vast majority of DNA is coiled into toroids by protamines, and a smaller portion of 5 to 15% is bound to histones and retains its nucleochromosomal structure. DNA is attached to the nuclear matrix at the matrix attachment regions. I'll show you a picture soon. Intact sperm DNA is crucial for sperm function, and sperm with damaged DNA may be able to achieve fertilization, but the error will manifest itself somewhere during the opening of the embryonic genome. Now, what is reactive oxidant species? Now, in any cellular metabolism, there is formation of ROS and there is scavenging of the ROS. In the normal body, there are normal natural scavengers like glutathiones, like catalases, like vitamin E, tocopherol. These scavenge the, so some amount of any metabolic activity, some formation and some scavenging is needed. But if more ROS is formed, if less scavenging is done, then it leads to exposure to ROS, which can cause cellular dysfunction. Now, the naturally occurring scavengers can also, and they are normally scavenged by superoxide dismutase. So the free radicals may be minus OH, that is hydroxyl, superoxide anion, that is minus O2, and these are normally scavenged by manganese, copper, and zinc superoxide dismutase. Excess of ROS can lead to cellular dysfunction. Now, let me tell you in short what this ROS does. First, it affects the cell membrane. It goes to the cell membrane and it alters the permeability of the cell membrane by causing toxic lipid peroxidation. After that, it goes to the mitochondrial RNA and DNA. Mitochondrial DNA is affected first. Now, as you know, the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. So it affects the ATPase activity and thus reduces the cellular function, that is the flagellar movements. So it causes asthenospermia. That is the mitochondrial involvement. And then it goes on to affect the nuclear DNA, that is the sperm nuclear chromatin, and causes damage. Now, ROS-induced DNA damage may be in the form of single strand break or double strand break, nucleotide modification, base loss, aberration in chromatin packing, and telomere shortening. As I told you, mitochondrial DNA is affected first, followed by nuclear DNA. You can see this model now. You can see these connecting things. These are nicks. These are single strands and double strands. If there is a single strand break, it is called SSB, and it is usually due to DNA nicks and ROS. SSB is easy to repair, but if you have more than two strands divided, then it could be more serious and can have deleterious impact on development of progeny. There are also other mechanisms like protamination failure, oxidative stress, apoptosis, ultimately leading to sperm damage. Now, how do you manage male lifestyle related infertility or oxidative stress related infertility? Now, like any other diseases, particularly say for cancer, for instance, or obesity for instance, what you need to do is to modify your lifestyle. Well, as soon as a patient comes, examine him, look at the volume of his testes, get his semen examination. If the semen examination is normal, the parameters are normal, do his FSH, do his testosterone, do his AMH, other things you can do. And do a DNA fragmentation when it is indicated. I'll tell you the indications for DNA fragmentation. But the first and most important thing in the management is to do lifestyle modification. So reduce the weight, ask the patient to undergo weight, reduce his weight, get his BMI down to at least 24, 25, 26, in the range of 24 to 26. Treat the underlying diseases like diabetes, hypercholesteremia. All these things need to be treated. Get rid of his smoking. Give him an adequate diet. Avoid too many fat caloric diets. Control his alcohol. Reduce his obesity. Avoid activities that heat the scrotum. Have proper ventilation. I mean, for example, in metro cities today, in Delhi and all, the quality of air is so poor that people may have to actually walk around with personal protective equipment and gas cylinders. Now, one thing that has actually helped us in the course of this COVID-19 lockdown is that our air has improved. And I would really seriously contemplate, I have selected about 5 patients to see if idiopathic oligoasthenoteratozoospermia improves during the lockdown. We have had a significant 40 days of lockdown. If this goes on to 60, I would have a serious sample. And I've also given these patients weight reduction, diet modifications, reduction of alcohol, control of diabetes, all these things. And along with these things, if we can, the quality of air is improved. So whether lifestyle factors would really help. Along with lifestyle factors, second thing is treat the varicocele, treat the leukocytospermia, and then give him good vitamins, food supplementations, and antioxidants. That brings us to antioxidants. Now, what are the different antioxidants available? Different antioxidants, many are available. You have coenzyme Q10, you have levocarnitine, acetyl levocarnitine, astaxanthin, zinc, lycopene, folic acid, B1, B6, B12, selenium, L-arginine, citric acid, so on and so forth. Which one will you give? Now, in the countries abroad, they usually prefer to give vitamin C. They prefer to give vitamin E. They give basic medicine. But now we have ample evidence to indicate that some of these newer mitochondrial medicines, that is newer antioxidants, seriously help. There are two people in the world who are doing amazing studies on this. One is our own Dr. Ashok Agarwal from Cleveland Clinic, and he has almost 200 to 300 publications. And I am directly in touch with him. I talked to him many times and I've attended a lot of his lectures. And the other one is Mohammad Reza. Now, as you know, he's from Iran and he also has a very sizable collection of mitochondrial. These are both, they call themselves mitochondrial medicine specialists. But these, they believe now that latest studies and publications show that coenzyme Q10 in a dose of 200 to 300, higher the dose, better the results. For anti-aging, for example, they are using doses of 600 to 1200 milligrams per day. It is an amazing antioxidant. Levocarnitine and acetyl levocarnitine can be 1 to 1.5 grams. And then, of course, 8 milligrams of astaxanthin, 30 milligrams of zinc, lycopene, and other things. So coenzyme Q10, I'll tell you a little bit about it. It's concentrated in the mitochondrial midpiece. It is a natural occurring compound found in the body. It is found in foods, particularly in fish and meats. So those who are vegetarians may find coenzyme Q10 particularly useful. They act as electron carrier in the mitochondrial respiratory chain, and they act as free radical scavengers. Now, in sperm cells, coenzyme Q10 is concentrated in the mitochondria, and thus they help in flagellar movements. Thus, they reduce the asthenospermia. Reduction in coenzyme Q10 is observed in sperm cells in idiopathic varicocele-associated asthenozoospermic patients. So administration of coenzyme Q10 resulted in increased pregnancy rates. Now, these are the people, Ashok Agarwal and Cleveland Clinic also, they have done studies with individual drugs to find out which one of these drugs is. We use combinations because combinations are particularly useful. Now, levocarnitine is a big 1 gram, 1.5 grams, which may not fit into a tablet. So you get sachets. You get lots of sachets. You get, for example, you get, what is that? Maxoza L, for example, or carnitine, astaxanthin, and combinations of levocarnitine, acetyl levocarnitine. So acetyl levocarnitine is necessary for transport of fatty acids into the mitochondria, and low levels of acetyl levocarnitine reduce fatty acid concentrations in the mitochondria and decrease sperm motility. Lycopene is a bright red pigment and phytochemical found in tomatoes, red fruits, watermelon, and guava. Please eat plenty of fresh fruits. That's why we say this belongs to a class referred to as carotenoids, which are yellow, orange, and red pigments, and these are plant synthesized. And lycopene possesses superior abilities as compared to other carotenoids. So lycopene is also extremely useful antioxidant. And there are different lycopene trials, 2000 micrograms twice daily for 3 months as compared to the normal. And they have shown that improvement in sperm concentration in 20 patients and motility in 16 patients. So 46% of the patients showed improvement in sperm morphology. So this study concluded that lycopene therapy has a role in the management of idiopathic male infertility. Again, levocarnitine, I've already told you, another trial conducted by Costa et al., which shows dramatically improving sperm parameters. So you have empirical antioxidant therapy may be given for up to 2 to 3 months as the spermatogenesis cycle is of 63 days. So whenever you give antioxidants, please give for at least 2 or 3 months. Which one to give? You can decide which one to give. But I particularly prefer 300 milligrams of coenzyme Q10. And along with that, I prefer to give a sachet, which contains all the other things, lycopene, astaxanthin, and along with levocarnitine and acetyl levocarnitine. So you can give that for 2 months and you can do a study for yourself. But this should be combined with lifestyle modification. This should be combined with treatment of leukocytospermia, and this should be combined with effective treatment, surgical treatment of varicoceles when indicated. Large amount of Cochrane data shows beneficial effect of micronutrients. Now, why do we need SDF testing? I have already showed you this. Now, there are different DNA fragmentation tests. Tests that measure the extent of DNA damage, which could be SCD test, SCSA, acridine orange, comet assay. Then you have the tunnel assay, and you have the staining, that is the chromomycin A3 and the aniline blue staining. And the limitations of the testing is a poor accuracy, poor reproducibility, lack of standardized protocols, intra-assay variability, and most importantly, it is the variability in the chosen cutoff values. Now, we have been doing this test for the last 5 years, and each center has to determine for itself in his lab what would be the cutoff value. For example, the SCD test that we do, the Halo test, we had a cutoff value of 16%. So when we had a cutoff value of 16%, we found that all the patients were going into the category of DNA fragmentation positive. Then we saw the results of these patients, and retrospectively, we were able to readjust our cutoff value to around 24%. So today we say that 24% is the cutoff, less than 24% is normal, and more than 24% we choose to treat. In a meta-analysis though, the diagnostic accuracy of tunnel assay was reported to have the highest precision specificity of 91.6% at a cutoff point of 16.8% as compared to other tests. Now, one more thing, if the sperm that you get is, there are very few sperms and the motility is very poor. Now it is proven that testicular sperms are better than ejaculated sperms because the testicular sperms are not exposed to the reactive oxidant species in the chorda of the epididymis. Because in the chorda, there is a bottleneck, and then it goes into the vas, and when the immature sperms and the sperms remain in the chorda of the epididymis, they are exposed to reactive oxidant species. And there is a large study by Steve et al. Which compared 81 testicular sperm samples with 91 ejaculated sperm cycles, where the male partner had OATS with high SDF, and they showed that there is immense improvement where testicular sperms are used instead of. Now, what then are the indications of sperm DNA fragmentation testing? Now, the first indication is to select candidates who would benefit most for varicocelectomy. If you have a varicocele candidate, he has a big varicocele, and if he shows high SDF, high DNA fragmentation index, then this is a candidate for. On the contrary, the other way around, if the patient has a very normal sperm count, 100 million, and yet the DFA value is high, DFI is high, then this patient you would operate the varicocele, even if the sperm counts are normal. Second indication is to help offer ICSI as an earlier option. If the DFI value is high, then you would not waste time in doing IUI and IVF. You would straight away go for an ICSI. Third indication is as a prognostic test for subsequent ART cycles where there is a recurrent ART failures. And last is to strengthen lifestyle modification factors like tobacco, industrial chemicals, and to monitor the patient response. And last but not the least, to monitor the response to antioxidants. Now, final word on STF testing. Both ASHRAE and British Fertility Society agree with the significance of sperm DNA integrity testing for natural and ART cycles, but do not support the routine use of this test. The final recommendation of ASRM is that there is insufficient evidence at present to recommend routine use of DNA integrity tests in the evaluation and treatment of infertile couples. So what we can then do to decrease SDF? As I told you, reduce his weight, control his diabetes, let him sleep well, reduce his stress, let him quit smoking, let him control his alcohol, and treat the underlying diseases, and identify conditions like leukocytospermia and varicocele, and give him antioxidants for 2 to 3 months. And in the laboratory, how can we avoid iatrogenic sperm DNA fragmentation? Have short abstinence periods, 1 to 1.5 days is good enough. Instruct the patient to deliver the specimen just before ART. Like husband comes and gives the specimen and then goes to the office. The embryologist comes at 1 o'clock and then processes the sperm. That should not be done. Within 20 minutes to 30 minutes, maximum 45 minutes after giving the sample, you should process the sperms, wash them, and then keep them in the hot air oven. Process the specimens as soon as possible. The incubation time after processing should not exceed 4 hours. Thaw cryopreserved specimen just before performing ART. If you're going to do a, say, donor insemination, you thaw the frozen sperms and you keep it for 4 hours, 5 hours, not done. You should use it. Thaw it just before the ART procedure, get it to the normal temperature and use it. And always use testicular sperm in preference to ejaculated sperms when you don't get results. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, sir, for this wonderful
Yeah, now you can give me.
Yeah, I will go for the question and answer, sir. We just want to give a big thank to Dr. Purnima ma'am and also Dr. Kishore sir, and also a big thank to all the participant doctors from India as well as Nepal. And now the session is open for question. I request all to put the question in the Q&A so that sir will answer it one by one. Sir, you have to click that Q&A.
What is the difference between leukocytospermia and pyospermia? It is the one and the same thing. Leukocytospermia means presence of pus cells in the semen. Now, when you say leukocytospermia, that is why I told you the difference between round cells and the immature spermatocytes. So, it is important to differentiate between round cells and pus cells. So, once you identify a pus cell, then it is leukocytospermia. So, if you have even one pus cell in 10 squares of the macular chamber, then by definition, this is leukocytospermia and it needs to be treated. During ejaculation, from where is the semen released? From the testes or epididymis? The sperms come from the testes. From the retitestes, they come into the epididymis. Then through the head, body, and tail, that is the cauda, the caput, corpus, and cauda. Then it goes through the vas deferens, and they come to the ejaculatory ducts. When a person they are the ducts from the prostatic glands and the ducts from the Cowper's glands, the ducts from the seminiferous tubules are added to it. So only about 2 to 4% of the seminal volume is sperms, and the remaining semen that you get, 5 ml of semen or 3 ml of semen that you get, is largely the prostatic secretions and the seminal vesicular secretions. So the semen is a combination of the sperms along with the prostatic secretions. The sperms come from the testes and the other things come from the accessory glands. What is the cause of necrozoospermia? Yes, necrozoospermia means all dead sperms. Now, necrozoospermia, where all the sperms die, if they occur naturally, then they are usually due to infections. One of the above causes, either due to infection or due to varicoceles. So you have to identify these two causes. If not, it could be idiopathic necrozoospermia, but you need to evaluate that how many of these sperms are actually immotile sperms and how many of these sperms are dead sperms. So you need to do some tests to, like Haas test is there, you have staining, you have, what else is there? You have the twitch of the tail that you can get with pentoxyphilin or theophylline, use that in ICSI. Necrozoospermia means dead sperms, and the prognosis is very poor in necrozoospermia. It can also be due to epididymal infection or testicular infections, which can occur due to other things like tuberculosis, etc. Many times in tuberculosis, you also get hemospermia. You get blood in the semen. How long antioxidant should be given when semen analysis is when semen analysis to be repeated in male factor? Antioxidant should be given for at least 2 months. Preferably 3 months, because 60 to 75 days, 73 days total sperm formation, and the the semen analysis should be repeated after minimum 60 days. Role of clomiphene citrate in OATS. Clomiphene citrate is not indicated in OATS. Clomiphene citrate is one of the treatments that is given in male infertility, idiopathic male infertility, but it has a hormonal basis. The rationale for giving clomiphene citrate in low sperm counts is that it is an anti-estrogen and therefore reduces the circulating estrogens, and by negative feedback it will stimulate the pituitary to secrete more of FSH. So that is the principle, but it has a side effect, or it has a drawback, in that it suppresses both FSH and LH. If it stimulates LH, it will cause testosterone release, and high testosterone which has a very marked negative feedback axis, in turn will suppress the axis to produce azoospermia. So just I want to tell you that in OATS or in idiopathic male infertility, testosterone also should never be given. There is only one report by Hussain et al. Which indicates the beneficial effect of clomiphene citrate in oligohistiocytosis. But otherwise, most reports are not showing any proven effects. Multiple randomized studies are not showing any proven effects of clomiphene citrate or even letrozole. Does any sperm selection method help patients with high DNA? What is that? Does any sperm selection method help in patients with high DNA fragmentation? No, DNA fragmentation tells us the percentage of the sample that is that has a fragmented DNA. When it comes to doing an IUI, we do not know the percentage of normal sperms will help in getting a pregnancy. So we cannot select we cannot fractionally, there is microfluidics to separate the sperms, but separation techniques, microfluidics apart, there are no known separation techniques which will separate high DNA and low DNA. But all these other tests like SCSA as well as the sperm chromatin dispersion test, that is the halo test, will tell us the percentage of fragmented sperms in a particular sample. There is no way of separately selecting those sperms. Yes, you can select better quality sperms in an ICSI. When you are selecting a single sperm, you can select that by using maybe your what is that? Optics, micro optics. What is that? IMSI, intracytoplasmic selection of morphologically selected sperms. Injection of morphologically selected. There you can see the vacuoles in the cytoplasm. That will also give us a clue as to that sperm is good or bad. But there is no method to select the better DNA from the worse DNA. But the whole sample we need to improve the DNA by to improve the quality of the semen sample, so that that sample has a more percentage of normal sperms and therefore a more chances of getting pregnancy. Antioxidants, I've answered this. How long to continue the antioxidant therapy for unexplained severe OATS before offering ICSI? We continue it for about 2 months, maximum 3 months, not more than 3 months. It will not help. But you have to take a call. You have to do IUI. If you do a good wash and you can separate, and if you can get very good sperms, even a small concentration of very good sperms, and if you can do a perfect timed IUI, then you would still make this patient pregnant. So give 1 to 2 cycles of a very good super ovulation with IUI, where you can make the patient pregnant. Don't jump directly to ICSI, but don't keep on doing IUIs. If the patient doesn't respond or doesn't become pregnant, and you have a count of 3 million, 4 million, 5 million with a very poor motility and very poor concentration of very progressively motile sperms, don't keep on doing IUIs. Do 2 to 3 IUIs and then go on for ICSI. But IUI can work if the quality of that sperms after wash is inspiring to the person who watches it. That's why I always recommend that before you do an IUI, see the post-wash sample. And if you find that the sperms are really raring to go, they're really excited and they're going to impregnate the oocyte, you get that intuition. We have got, on intuition, we have got so many pregnancies. Patient has come, patient incidentally is ovulating on the day Purnima does the sonography, and we do a sample, not very good sperms, but some of the sperms are really raring to go. And when we see those sperms, we say, no, okay, I mean, let's try one IUI. We do it and they do become pregnant. Although the chances of becoming pregnant with low counts are less, proportionately less, but they can never be discounted. That you cannot tell that this patient will never become pregnant. So IUI, there is always a hope, but do it properly. Do it with the good quality of sperms. Try to improve the sperms. And if the sperms don't improve, don't keep on doing IUI. Go on for IVF or ICSI. When should we wash thawed sample again? We usually thaw the sample and then wash it and then use it. We don't keep it. We thaw it and we immediately use it, because that is the surest way of preventing exposure. Yeah, after what the frozen sample? Yeah. Achha, you are talking of not the retrieved sperms. You are talking of the thawed sample. The thawed samples are thawed, not the entire sample, but after doing a sperm wash and the sperm concentrated sample is then thawed, is then frozen. So when you thaw this frozen sample, there is no need to again wash it. I thought you were talking of the retrieved sperms. Is it possible to do spermatid injections in male? These techniques were tried before ICSI came, just at the beginning of before sperm retrieval came. People were injecting. In 1997, 1998, we had gone to Israel, and there I had witnessed a procedure called Rosny, round spermatid injection. Elongated spermatids may be injected and they can cause fertilizations, but there are no proven pregnancies with spermatid injections. They can cause pregnancy. But round spermatid injections were also injected in 1997, before sperm retrieval techniques were. Today we know now that mature sperms are needed for, or at least immature sperms with tails are needed for a successful impregnation or causing a successful pregnancy. So as far as possible, spermatid injections can be avoided. What are the indications for IMSI? IMSI is again a method of sperm selection. IMSI has its problems, and IMSI is no longer a reliable method for sperm selection. People would rather prefer hyaluronan, or they prefer just a twitch with theophylline or pentoxyphylline to select a sperm. But IMSI does tell you the vacuoles inside the head, and you can do a sperm selection. Disadvantage of ICSI is the prolonged exposure outside in an in vitro environment, and also the heat generated by the machine. That also affects the sperm. So the IMSI is not a very popular method. We had used it once upon a time. Many of us use Ayurvedic medicines. What is your opinion? I am really not qualified in Ayurveda to give, but the people do believe that certain Ayurvedic medicines like Shilajit and so many others, they are useful, but I have not used, and I don't use Ayurvedic medicines. I use Ayurvedic medicines as aphrodisiacs for certain erectile and ejaculatory dysfunction as a part of an aphrodisiac package, but not so much for sperms. When to check anti-sperm antibodies? Yes, good question. Anti-sperm antibodies, whenever there's sperm agglutination is a feature of antibodies. And those are the patients where the sperm agglutinate or form clusters. They may be head-to-head agglutinated, they may be tail-to-tail, or they may be in a Fugdi type, So when you see such ring formations in the semen, you know that this patient may have anti-sperm antibodies. And the anti-sperm antibodies in the females are usually in the cervical mucus, and for that you do a PCT, post-coital test, and IUI is enough to treat that, bypass the anti-sperm antibodies in the vagina, in the cervix. But if the male has antibodies to his own sperms, then this is treated by giving steroids. And the best steroid to be given is, of course, Visolone, that is prednisolone. And the dose recommended is 160 milligrams per day, reduced to 120, reduced to 80, reduced to 40 over a period of 3 months. But in clinical practice, because our patients' body weights may not all be so high, I prefer to give start with 40 milligram 1 TDS, 40 milligram 1 BD, and 40 milligram half BD, or 20 milligram 1 BD for one month, and then taper it. Because sometimes sudden large doses of steroids has got problems, and you can get reactions, and you can get certain problems, apart from suppression of the intrinsic adrenocortical axis. Male, 34 years, machine operator, asthenospermia, grade 2 varicocele, not improved with antioxidants after 3 months. Next step, varicocelectomy, or to I would recommend a proper 3D, not 3D, a color Doppler, and actually measure this. When you do a Valsalva on color Doppler, when you do a forced expiration against a closed glottis, you can see the vein bulging. You measure that vein. If the vein is more than 3 millimeters, please operate the varicocele. Do a good surgery. You don't have to do a microsurgical varicocelectomy. You can do just with the, you have to be careful. You have to do it at the level of the external ring. Anything done above the level of the internal ring has a recurrence rate. So the suprainguinal varicocele ligations are not done anymore. So it is the opening of the cord, identification of the different veins. Even the gubernacular veins are ligated. All the different large veins going to the scrotum are ligated, so that the varicocele does not recur. And there's a very good chance that with varicocele surgery, the patient's sperm counts may improve, and the patient may even become pregnant naturally. But if you do a varicocele surgery, make sure that you do an IUI immediately after 2 months, and don't wait for a recurrence to occur. I think I have answered all the questions. Anything else? Adizoa. Adizoa is one such Ayurvedic medicine, and it is made by Charak, I think. And Charak and Dabur are the two Ayurveda, and Himalaya. Charak, Dabur, and Himalaya are 3 Ayurvedic companies who have done a lot of research in these Ayurvedic medicines, and they have certain trials also which they have done, and they have shown reports indicating improvement, but they are not very convincing. They are not placebo-controlled, randomized, double-blind trials. So today, what the fraternity accepts is a placebo-controlled, double-blind RCT. So that is not what these people do, but maybe Ayurvedic medicines, if they help, well and good. Does PIXI or MAX or IMSI result better results in patients with high DNA damage? We don't. MAX, I think, would try to will segregate those sperms, but PIXI we use mainly in patients where none of the sperms are moving. All the sperms are immotile, and whatever you have retrieved, they are not moving, and you would want to know whether you should inject this sperm or not. That is when in that cohort of sperms, if you can put them in a hyaluronan dish, then sperms which adhere to the hyaluronan will have a better chance of producing pregnancies. IMSI we are not doing, man. Viscous semen sample. Yes, this is a very good question. Many times we have a viscous, viscosity is the ability of the sperm or the ease with which a drop of the sperm falls off the tip of the pipette. Now, in a very viscous sample, you will not be able to even pick up that sample because it is thick. It will smudge. It is a very thick sample. Here, what you do is to add some media to the sample and keep it for some time at 37 degrees in the incubator. And many times it will liquefy. Or you can take a pipette and do inside out after mixing the sample with the viscous sample properly with the media. You can, with the pipette, you can pipette it off and on, in and out, and it will probably liquefy. But otherwise, you have to add chymotrypsin or hyaluronidase, and that will help to liquefy the sample. But one of the treatments of viscous sample is to give bromhexine hydrochloride. Bromhexine. The bromhexine is a mucolytic which is used in to liquefy the sputum, and bromhexine in the dose of 8 milligrams 3 times a day for 3 months. This is what doctor told me. Bruno Ludenfeld told me that bromhexine and I've given to many of my patients. I had difficulty in getting bromhexine for some time, and still I'm not getting now again. 8 milligrams 3 times a day for 3 months will help significantly to reduce the viscosity of the semen. At what FSH level is there less chance of retrieval of sperms in non-obstructive azoospermia? Now, generally, the higher the FSH, the lesser is the more is the testicular failure, and less is the chance of sperm retrieval. But only FSH is not an indicator which will tell us whether we can retrieve sperms or not. The best indicator of the sperm retrieval is a microbiopsy. It will tell us the pathology, whether it is Sertoli cell only syndrome, whether it is early or late maturation arrest, or whether it is hypospermatogenesis. Hypospermatogenesis and late maturation arrest will have the best chance of. But if the FSH is very high, that is more than 20, we take 20 as the cutoff. Normal FSH is 5 to 15. So if you take the mean of that, it is 10. 2 times the normal, the 2 times the mean, that is 20. So we take in our lab as 20 as the cutoff. So anything above 20, the chances become progressively less. But if the testis is severely damaged, you will get FSH as high as 70 or 80 also. Now, FSH level is important because in non-obstructive azoospermia, now certain treatments have come which can help to reverse this, or which can help to improve the chance of retrieval. And that is called as those treatments by Shiraishi et al. If the patient's FSH is high, and if the T to E ratio is less than 10, estradiol to testosterone ratio is less than 10, and if the patient has had a negative retrieval in spite of giving letrozole or in spite of giving aromatase inhibitors and HCG injections, then this patient needs to be given HCG injections, human chorionic gonadotropin injections, 2000 international units 3 times a week for 3 months. After 3 months, you should repeat the FSH. And if the FSH drops by more than 25%, I treat these patients with REC FSH subsequently for another 3 months, 75 international units 3 times a week for the next 3 months. And the report shows that in the literature, I have not yet got a positive result yet. I'm still 3 of my patients are on this trial, but this 21% of these patients of Shiraishi et al.'s paper showed positive retrieval in patients who had a previous negative retrieval. But again, in the previous retrieval, you ought to have done a microbiopsy to find out what the underlying pathology is. So cutoff point for FSH, 20, more than 30, more than 40, the chances get progressively bleak. I think that's it. At what minimum sperm count and motility to do IUI? They say that the total motile count should be at least 1 to 2 million now to get a pregnancy in IUI. Normally we say 5 to 8 million, but even with 1 to 2 progressively motile sperms after wash, you can still get a pregnancy. But anything less than 1 million, the chances of IUI pregnancies are very less. Poseidon group 4, how much HMG is needed in ART cycle? I think now the question is for you. Come. 450, the answer is. Someone has asked, Chetan has asked this question to ma'am. In the Poseidon group 4, how much HMG is needed for an ART cycle? For the 450 per day, 450 units per day for 10 days. Is vitamin C a very potent antioxidant? Have you ever gone through any study with high dose? Yes, there are studies with vitamin C in OATS. It is a potent antioxidant, but a combination of coenzyme Q10 and acetyl levocarnitine seems to be giving better results. Although vitamin C, the dose that is 100 milligrams, if you take it 4 times a day, you can get very acidic urine. You can get burning micturition also. So vitamin C is a good antioxidant, but I would I would take it for common cold or maybe for COVID prophylaxis, but I'm a little scared of giving it as a treatment for oligohistiocytosis. No, you don't go on a single report of semen analysis. Always go by multiple reports, because if the patient's mood is not proper, if he has had an intercourse previous night, or if he has fought with his wife, or he has masturbated in his sleep, or something has happened, then the report may not come proper. And you should have at least 3 consecutive reports with a gap of 1 week at least. Don't rely on just a single report. Scrotal USG. Yes, scrotal USG is not routine. Both ASRM and ESHRE in the guidelines do not recommend scrotal USG for routine evaluation of an infertile male. However, scrotal USG has got a lot of uses. First and foremost, scrotal USG is done for diagnosis of a varicocele and to determine the size, color in the Doppler, to determine the size of the internal spermatic vein. There it will really give you a diagnosis of the grading of the varicocele. So that is the first thing. Number 2, routine scrotal USG of the testicles will make you, which have been reported when routine scanning of infertile patients has been done. So scrotal USG is also done in epididymoarchitis, where it will be able to tell you damage to the epididymis, and also it will give you a very reliable measurement of the testes. If you take a scrotal USG measurement of the testes, at least 2 dimensions perfect measurement, and even if you are lucky from the bottom, you will get the 3rd dimension of the testes and the width of the testes, and you will be able to do a much better evaluation of the testicular volume as compared to an orchidometer also. Which is better sperm retrieval technique? In obstructive azoospermia, PISA is a better sperm retrieval technique. If PISA fails, TISA should be done. If TISA fails, then TESI should be done, TISE should be done. And preferably if TISA fails, then TISE should be done on the opposite side, because multiple TISA would have made that testes bleed when you do a TESI. So the PISA first, then TISA, then multiple TISA, and then TISE on the opposite side. In non-obstructive azoospermia, TESI is the better procedure of choice. TISA can be done, but TISA followed by multiple TISA or TESI or TISE, that is TESE, where you take a bit of the tubules outside and you get and if TESI doesn't work, then micro-TESI. Also, indications for micro-TESI: if the volume of the testes is less than 10 ml, then micro-TESI is the answer. If the volume of the testes is more than 10 ml, then multiple TESI will give you the same results as a micro-TESI. And micro-TESI is a very complicated procedure. It requires a proper setup, a proper microscope, a proper lab, and a good embryologist and freezing techniques to freeze or to handle those very fragile sperms retrieved. Teratozoospermia with zero normal morphology treatment. Again, teratozoospermia can be a part of OATS. So you have to treat the same causes. I would treat the infection, treat the varicocele, treat the leukocytospermia, do lifestyle modification, give antioxidants. All those things have to be done. And also look at the testes for any pathology like epididymoarchitis or anything, recent infections or mumps orchitis or any other form of orchitis. If the DNA fragmentation comes out to be more than the cutoff volume, what do? You give ICSI or microfluidics or donor sperm. No, you don't have to do donor sperm. You can still do it. Doesn't mean, see, DNA fragmentation test will tell you that the number of sperms, DNA fragmented sperms in that specimen will be, say, 30%. But then 70% are still good sperms. So you can still process those sperms and use them for IUI. If you're doing ICSI, you can still select the best sperms by the different methods that are available to you. So there is no need to do any of the other things. You can still use those sperms for an IUI. Microfluidics would be of help. Does antioxidant work in severe oligospermia? It can work in severe oligospermia. And if DNA fragmentation is more than the cutoff value, then give antioxidants, do all lifestyle modification, and then repeat the DNA fragmentation. But important thing is to repeat it in the same lab by the same person, and to really standardize your lab for the DNA fragmentation test. Otherwise, the reports will keep coming different. Sperm loss after thawing 10%, 10 to 20%. We do have sperm loss. Even thawing exposes them to reactive oxygen species. No, if the DFI is high, then you go for an earlier ICSI option. You do DFI where the counts are reasonable. If the counts are very few sperms, you can't do a DNA fragmentation test. So if the counts are if the DFI is done and the DFI is high, in spite of giving antioxidants, then do all the other methods. Treat the leukocytospermia, treat the varicocele, do lifestyle modification, and all those things that I told. And then do an ICSI. ICSI will definitely result in pregnancies. Or you can, yes, or you can remove testicular sperms if the sperms are very less. IMSI is not indicated there. How to process sperm before sperm cryopreservation? The same way, you can do a swim down. We do swim down because you can do swim up. If the counts are very good, we can do swim up, simply wash them and let them float up. Or you can do a great density gradient and get the sperms and then freeze them. Concentrate them and freeze them. Does the frozen sample equally good as fresh sample for donor IUI? No, the fresh sample is always better than frozen sample. But in donor IUI, we cannot use a fresh sample because of the quarantine period required for HIV clearance. Because HIV testing is done in donor, all the banks are needed to do an HIV quarantine for 90 days. So the patient's sample, who gives the sample, does his HIV testing. If it is negative, the sample is frozen. And then after 90 days of quarantine, he will still repeat the HIV and he is still negative because he may have been in the window period. And then he will still transmit the HIV. So HIV is a concern, although it is not for really, because in HIV, the entire seminal plasma is completely removed and only the sperms are frozen. So in the seminal plasma removes all the CD4, CD8, all those things which carry the HIV things, and the actual sperms do not have the HIV virus. But still there is a rare chance, I asked this question to many people, that why do we still need to clear HIV? Now, a lot of studies have come, particularly from Turkey. There is a large study which showed that if the viral load is below a particular thing and if the patient is treated and with ART and if the viral load is almost very low or nearing zero, then the direct insemination can be done and there is no risk of HIV transmission. There are reports to that extent. But still, when you do a donor insemination, you never want to take an HIV risk because patient will blame you unnecessarily. Although there are other things that for quarantining the sample is needed. I think that answers most of the questions. Hello?
I think, sir, all the answers are questions, mostly the repeat questions are there. Thank you very much, sir, once again for this wonderful session.